I didn't go into that session to confess anything. I went in to summarize. That's what I do when something feels complicated. I make it coherent. I make it sound like a conclusion. I sat down. I started talking. And somewhere in the middle of my first sentence, I realized something that made my mouth go dry. I wasn't describing what happened. I was building a case, not against him, against the part of me that already knew better. It's strange how a room can feel familiar until it doesn't. Same chair, same light, same air that always feels slightly too still. I'd been there enough times to know the rhythm. I talk, I organize, I leave feeling clearer than when I arrived. That's the deal. But that day, the rhythm didn't catch. I started speaking the way I always do, carefully, efficiently, and then I stopped. Not because I forgot what I wanted to say, because I could feel how prepared it was. Prepared isn't a bad thing. Prepared is responsible. Prepared means you've done the work, except that's not what it felt like in that moment. In that moment, it felt like performance. I don't mean theatrical, I mean calibrated. The tone that communicates reason, the pace that suggests emotional control, the kind of honesty that never risks saying too much. I've always believed composure was a virtue, and it is. It just depends on what it's protecting. There was a silence early on, not an awkward one, not a tense one, a deliberate one, the kind of silence that shows up when someone is listening to the structure of what you're saying, not just the content. I kept going anyway. I explained, the way I always do. I made it make sense. And then I heard my own voice say something I didn't mean to say out loud. Not a fact, a strategy. I said, I don't want this to sound like what it is. It's not that I was lying. That's the part that would be easier to tell. If I could say I was lying, I could also say I stopped. But what I was doing wasn't lying. It was something more refined. I was shaping. There's a way you can tell the truth and still protect the narrative. A way you can be accurate and still avoid being exposed. I didn't learn that in relationships. I learned that in adulthood, in boardrooms, in performance reviews, in conversations where you can't afford to look uncertain. You learn to say what happened without revealing what it meant. That session, I realized I was doing the same thing with my own life. I kept calling my choices reasonable. I said it the way people say healthy, the way people say mature, as if the word itself could serve as proof. And the more I used it, the more I could feel how badly I needed it to be true. Here's the thing about being reasonable. It can start as a standard, and then it becomes a shield. Reasonable women don't implode. Reasonable women don't choose chaos. Reasonable women don't risk their reputations for feelings. Reasonable women don't do what I was doing. I didn't say that last part, but I felt it. I felt the way my throat tightened around it, the way my body tried to keep the sentence from forming. And in that moment, I understood something I didn't want to understand. My composure wasn't evidence of my innocence. It was evidence of practice. Practice looks like being able to speak calmly about things you haven't actually faced. Practice looks like explaining your way around guilt until guilt sounds irrational. Practice looks like having insight that arrives before consequence, not to protect you, to protect the image of you that you're committed to maintaining. I've spent years building a life that looks stable, not performatively, not artificially. Real stability, real achievements, real discipline, which is why it mattered so much that the story stayed consistent, not the story of us, the story of me, the woman who did everything right, the woman who made wise decisions, the woman who didn't let emotion sabotage her future. That woman was the version I was defending. And that's when the session turned. Not because something new happened, but because I realized I wasn't there to be understood. I was there to be validated. Those are not the same thing. People assume therapy is where you get answers, but sometimes it's where you lose the ones you've been living on. That day, I could feel one of my answers slipping. The answer I'd been using as a foundation. I'm responding to what he did. It's a clean sentence. It makes me the witness. It makes me the injured party. It makes my anger principled. It also keeps me from asking a question that feels unacceptable. Not, what did he do? But, what was I already capable of doing before he ever gave me an excuse? That question didn't arrive like an accusation. It arrived like clarity.